of my book, and I believe the premise of content marketing is that you are a publisher. Social media is obviously content marketing. It's pushing content out into media that you do not buy. This is how I differentiate between content marketing and other forms of marketing, such as advertising and direct. If you're running an email campaign, you're effectively buying the media through your email service provider.
Sorry, I think the microphone.
Sure, I'm not loud enough.
They're recording it and they
Gotcha. Obviously, if you advertise, you're buying media. You're buying time if it's broadcast media, or you're buying rectangles or squares if you're buying display advertising. The difference between content is the difference between advertising and publishing. Content marketing means you own the media and you control the media and you determine what goes into the media. So that means you're a publisher or a broadcaster in some respects. You get to control what the message is, how often you broadcast the message, the editorial tone of voice of the message, and you should be giving a lot of thought and consideration to what that message is supposed to accomplish or achieve. So with that, we will talk about content marketing metrics. I'm going to speak for maybe half an hour or so, and then we're going to open things up to questions. So when I was talking about this session with Jim and with somebody at the Web Analytics Association and the Advertising Analytics Bureau, I said, well, what should I really tell people about measuring content marketing? And they said, well, you know, content marketing is being a publisher, so anybody doing content marketing should measure what publishers measure. What do publishers measure? I have a very deep editorial background. I've run some very major websites like ClickZ and Search Engine Watch and Econsultancy, and what we as publishers and editors measured were page views, time spent on page, that helps determine whether or not people are actually reading or consuming the content on that page. Top stories, what's the most popular content? The number of subscribers you have is always a very good indication of what succeeds. And ad sales. So, you know, bottom line, if you're a publisher, you measure like a publisher measures. So that's all I have to say on this topic. Clearly, there is more to measure in content marketing than the things that publishers measure, because content marketing is in fact a form of marketing and you're actually trying to achieve something. Where things get complicated in content marketing is determining what it is that you're trying to achieve. And in order to outline this, I have two case studies showing the really wildly disparate natures of content marketing. The first is Pepsi Refresh. Pepsi Refresh was a project that Pepsi did, I think it was late last year, earlier this year, where they got a lot of users to nominate social good projects that Pepsi would support. So Pepsi created a lot of content around this, and they of course got users, fans, consumers to create a lot of content promoting socially good causes for the environment, for education, health, you name it. And these things were voted up, and then a winner was selected, and Pepsi gave them a lot of money and publicity and support. So what did Pepsi measure in terms of content? It was really what we might call very soft metrics. They were listening on the web to how many times people mentioned the Pepsi Refresh project, and they used sentiment analysis to determine whether these mentions were positive or negative. So basically they wanted to know if Project Refresh was creating any brand resonance for Pepsi and whether it was good brand resonance or bad brand resonance. This is one perfectly legitimate and very large scale and very, very expensive way to measure content marketing. The other end of the spectrum, this is a B2B case study. My friend Joe Chernoff is Chief Content Officer at a company called Eloqua, marketing automation. And Eloqua has been very, very successful publishing what it calls its grand guides to content and social media marketing on the web. Basically, it's a PDF download that, and you've all been through this process before, if you sign up and register and provide some information, you can download this useful piece of content. Joe is able to attribute several $1 million in existing and about to be closed business to the downloading of these guides. Some of it is in the final stage, some of it is in the contract stage, and he is very careful to attribute this to qualified leads who download the guide. And he defines a qualified lead as somebody who has a VP or above title. That is a very, very categorized, specific way of attributing revenue, and then they're following the VPs and following through the demo process, the sales process, and the closed and pending business process. So those are quality leads. This is a very, very good way of tracking content marketing ROI, but like all tracking methods, you really have to bear in mind it's not perfect. You look at a company like Google, for example, there's about 4 VPs in all of Google. So if somebody from Google were to download the guide, would they be considered a quality lead if they didn't have the title VP? According to Eloqua's rather rigid criteria, no, they wouldn't be, but nevertheless, it is a standard and a framework applied to really a rather mushy state of affairs, which is how do you measure this stuff? And how do you go into the CEO's office and say, as chief content officer of this company, I'm actually generating revenues and making stuff happen? So, you saw the Pepsi example, you saw the Eloqua example. They couldn't be more diametrically opposed. But the reason I showed you such diametrically opposed examples is because it's up to you as marketers to figure out what you want to measure and how you're going to measure it, and above all, why you want to measure it. Because there's a lot of stuff that you can measure, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, that I call activity measuring. It's busy work. You can measure it, you can keep track of it, you can keep counting it, but it doesn't necessarily apply to what you're trying to do, such as likes on Facebook. So you might want to measure subscribers if, of course, you have a subscribe mechanism. Fans, likes, are all things that you can count. SEO is, for many content marketers, a much more tangible thing to track. You can benchmark your visibility, your ranking, and see how much traffic is coming in through search, how much traffic is coming in through desired keywords, where you stand in search results vis-a-vis your competitors, what people are searching for in your web analytics versus the terms that they're actually finding you for on the web, and you can test content based on those keywords. Leads is another thing that you can track, but it's not enough to just track leads. What's a lead? Eloqua says a lead or a qualified lead is a VP or above title. But some people track the lifetime value of a lead. Is it a lead who comes back, or is it a lead who just poof disappears? Are leads customers who are referred to you by existing leads who are then potentially more valuable customers? And does your content, in that case, encourage that action to occur or that referral to occur? Sales is, of course, one of the top things when CEOs and CMOs are surveyed. They say they want their content marketing to achieve. Surprise, everybody's doing this to make money after all. But what in terms of sales? Content marketing is usually softer than, say, direct marketing copy. So are you looking for sales volume? Are you looking for dollar value? Are you looking for content marketing that might shorten the entire sales cycle? I divide content marketing into several different buckets. And the type of content that can really shorten the sales cycle is educational content or instructional content that helps people understand the value of your product or service so that you don't have to send a sales rep out, have them try and get an appointment. They actually get what you're trying to do before you're in the door talking to them or before they hit a buy button. Traffic to your site is another very good measure, but again, you want to track traffic in some sort of intelligent way. Otherwise, we're back to Web 1.0 when you're just tracking. Remember when we tracked hits? They weren't even called clicks yet. They were just people who happened to visit your site. So raw traffic data, probably not the best thing, but tracking traffic as it flows through your site, as it flows through a conversion path, that's a little bit more rational to track. Conversions, but then again, if you want to track conversions, you have to determine what a conversion is. There's obviously a whole separate summit going on about conversions here, so people who are far more expert in that department are speaking than I, but sales is a conversion, subscribers is a conversion, leads is a conversion. Anybody following a call to action is a conversion. So with Eloqua, a conversion was somebody who filled out that form and downloaded that PDF, not necessarily somebody who signed up for a multi-$10,000 marketing automation project. This is just one step on that conversion path. For Pepsi, a conversion was somebody who entered their refresh contest and then talked about the Pepsi refresh contest, who followed the call to action to tweet it or mention it on Facebook or like it. All of these things are conversions, and it's up to you as marketers and content marketers to determine which conversions matter, because not all actions matter, and you don't want to count everything because then it leads to the term we've all heard, analysis paralysis. Another thing you might want to measure is user lead or sales acquisitions costs. Content marketing can lower your overall marketing costs. Maybe it's because you're printing less print collateral. Maybe you're putting videos on the web that de-emphasize or make it not necessary to run as many TV advertisements. Maybe it cuts your travel budget when your salespeople don't need to meet clients and explain products to them because you have so much good informational digital content out there. So how is content marketing lowering the costs of the sales cycle, the acquisition cycle? These are all really, really, really sensible things to measure. One approach, and this is an approach that works particularly well in e-commerce, and I have to attribute this to Brain Traffic, who I think set this argument up very beautifully, is to assign a dollar value to every KPI. This works, but this only works in very specific circumstances. So, if you're running an e-commerce site that sells furniture and you know how much a chair costs and you know how many people visit the site and the average number of people who convert and buy the chair and the average number of people who drop out of the process. If you can create better content and convert more people, it costs this much to do the content, that much to sell the chair. You can actually justify fixing the content to boost sales, assuming that all of these assumptions are right, and they're probably not 100% right, but at least it sets a framework so that you can benchmark a content investment and decide, yes, it would be worth this much money to hire an agency or hire a person to fix our content because we could potentially get this kind of ROI out of it. But a lot of content marketing is measuring more than money. Things like those search engine rankings, which ultimately will translate into money, but it's one step along the way. A colleague of mine, Susan Ettlinger, who I give all the credit for this, this compass slide, developed this measurement compass for social media marketing, but of course we know that a lot of content marketing is social media. And she breaks down the various things that you can measure in content, and these are some of the softer non-monetary metrics like innovation. Is your content resonating with people who are then feeding back and giving you suggestions of how to improve and to innovate your products? New features that they might want to see that then makes you improve products and subsequently improve sales or reach a wider audience. Brand health. How is your brand resonating with consumers? This has a lot to do with listening, and what do you need to do to improve your brand's reputation, out in the wild, out in the internet. I bet companies like RIM are thinking about this a lot this week. Marketing optimization. Content can be a great listening and monitoring program to float ideas before you turn them into formal, expensive advertising campaigns that really require more substantial investments than editorial content or producing a video might. Revenue generation, it might open new avenues of revenue generation. Auxiliary products, which has something to do with innovation. It also has to do with the sales cycle and some of those other ideas we just discussed. Operational efficiency. Think of the companies that are using social media and various forms of conversational marketing to find efficiencies in customer service, customer feedback. Companies like Dell, Comcast Cares on Twitter, they're all increasing not only brand resonance, but their operational efficiency with call centers by operating digital content operations, particularly in customers. And then that bleeds into customer experience, giving customers the opportunity to interact with you, to relate to you, to speak back to them, to engage in dialogue. And this chart from this same report contains, I'm not going to go through these one by one, but a lot of different examples of how to measure sample formulas for measuring each one of these results on the compass. And of course, this slide will be available, and the report is also available as a free download on the Altimeter site. But there are social data challenges. All of these measurement things are not perfect. Just to give you an example, we discussed the Pepsi Refresh project in which they were doing sentiment analysis of discussions around Pepsi across the web. The software to do that kind of stuff isn't perfect yet. I think during the keynote today we heard that discussion of Tea Leaf, and he was talking about analyzing obscenities that were on the web, and he was saying sometimes they're good obscenities and sometimes they're bad. Like, I can't believe I'm working with such a bitch was one of the bad examples. And we had this bitch and hard project, but we got through it and we did it successfully. That falls into the bucket of sentiment analysis. Bitch can be a really bad word and it can be a really good word. So you don't always know if people are talking positively or negatively. Software isn't perfect. If you say something's really bad in some sectors of society, that could mean it's really good. Slang is slang. And that's just one example of some of the social data challenges out there. I believe in soft content metrics. Many of these can be taken as proxies. I like to use the word proxy for real hard metrics. We were just discussing some of the harder metrics like revenue metrics. Facebook likes, Google plus ones. This is really not something you can apply to your bottom line. Sometimes measuring this stuff is more activity and busy work than it is really useful information. But on the other hand, if you're just getting up to speed with content marketing, if you've just launched a blog for the first time, this can be really kind of useful in seeing how your content is resonating. It's not telling you how many widgets you're selling, but it is telling you what is interesting enough to people to comment on, to tweet, to retweet, to share on social networks. And by the way, some people, say Blog comments is a very, very good way to measure this stuff. But these sorts of things change. Content sharing, curation, and aggregation has become so dominant on social networks like Facebook and Google Plus and LinkedIn that people are commenting on blogs less on your actual blog and more in other places such as social networks. So you might have to, bear that in mind and shift emphasis and think, well, maybe these Facebook mentions are more important than comments on the actual blog post. But you can see how mushy and blurry these lines are getting in this area. So that's why I call these proxies, backlinks, comments, time spent on page. Time spent on page is something that's very, very often equated with engagement. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's very important to realize that the industry has not really defined or wrapped its arms around what engagement is. So if you want to measure engagement, you have to first define engagement and apply some sort of working definition to it. Otherwise, it's really pretty much a meaningless metric. Followers, another very mushy metric, and so are @ mentions. Nevertheless, they're all legitimate. So there's hard metrics, there's soft metrics. What should you do after you've defined everything and after you've decided what's important to you in terms of what your content is trying to achieve? I recommend to look for conversion. Conversion is critically important. If you're doing marketing, you're almost always, without exception, trying to get people who consume your content to convert to do something. Sometimes it's click the buy button, add to cart, checkout. More often than not in content marketing, it isn't. So what are the top converting referrers? When somebody mentions your site or your content and you get traffic from that source, and it converts more than traffic from any other source, that's something that you want to look at and nurture and encourage. A very extreme example of that would be the blog Boing Boing, which is one of the most popular blogs on the web. When Boing Boing mentions websites, they tend to go down because they get so much traffic, and very often it's very highly converting traffic. You don't necessarily want your site to go down, but you want that kind of referral that just brings bursts of enthusiastic traffic. What are the top converting pages on the web? What's on those pages? What do they say? What are the keywords? What are the phrases? What's the context of the link that brings people to you? Or what pages on your own site are the most effective? Analyze why and figure out how you can create more such pages. And then, this is Search Engine Optimization 101, what are the top converting keywords? What keywords related to your product or service really get people excited? And they're probably more long-tail keywords. If you're selling iPods, everybody else is selling iPods. What language do you couch those iPods in, or the way that you sell them, or the way that you ship them, or the way that they're accessorized that really gets people excited about buying them from you? Because effectively, they're a commodity people could buy from anyone. Sales attribution, obviously this matters. This is where it comes down to money and where the rubber hits the road. So if you're in e-commerce, this is fairly easy. You examine what's converting and what's not. Where are those referrals and things coming from? But there are other ways to track sales, such as having a dedicated 800 number in your content so that you know that this page of content with this 800 number converted better than that page of content with that other 800 number. That's basic A/B testing, but sometimes if your sales conversion process is offline, it's a way to track how your content is performing in terms of that sales attribution. And then, of course, an online forum for downloads, as we saw with the Eloquist case study. That is a very complex software software solution. People don't just click and buy it on the website. They have to express interest in a demo, and after they've had a demo, they go through a sales process and they meet or speak with a sales representative. So how do you know if that transaction that started online ever led to a conversion? You know, it's a very long sales cycle and a very complex process. And it's actually pretty easy, because in order to enter into this process, you had to start by filling out a form. So they know who you are, they know what your company is, that's how they got you the information, that's how the introduction was made. It's almost like getting a business card at this conference, and then you follow up with the person, and eventually you're doing business together. Lead quality. Again, we saw with Eloqua that they're defining a quality lead as somebody with a VP or above title. So how do you define it? If you're selling something regional, like snow tires, maybe a quality lead is somebody who lives in Maine and not in Florida or Southern California. There's all kinds of ways of slicing and dicing this beyond title. Prospect who first watched a video or downloaded a white paper. Sometimes your highest quality leads, the ones who are more likely to convert down the line, are people who took some sort of desired conversion action. You might find out that the people who watched the video turn into higher quality leads than the person who downloaded the white paper, or vice versa. But you have to be thinking about which is performing better in order to make the determination which one is working better. This is not something that publishers necessarily do, but it's something that people who are content marketing in order to lead to a conversion should very, very definitely be thinking about. Visibility is very, very important, especially if you're trying to track the brand metrics of your content and the awareness of your content. So web analytics, obviously key here. Keeping track of your site, your web presence, and obviously this is web presence when you're talking about Alexa or Compete.com, it's not social media presence. Benchmark yourself against competitors, against similar sites in this space. And if you get into really big content marketing efforts, if you're a large organization like American Express that's running huge sites like American Express Open, or if you're Purina running Pets.com, or if you're Johnson & Johnson running Babies.com, you might want to benchmark yourself against quote-unquote real publishers, because effectively that's who you're competing with in this space. And it's really astonishing to look at over the landscape of the web these days and see how many websites, like Pets.com, it sounds like a pet site, it sounds like a publisher, are really being run by brands, yet they contain quality information, and they actually have more traffic than do the quote-unquote real publishers in this space. I can tell you, I ran, for those of you who are familiar with it, ClickZ for 8 years. American Express Open didn't exist when I was running ClickZ. It sprang out of nowhere, and of course American Express has way more money than just a humble publisher, and they've just crushed ClickZ. I mean, not in terms of quality, but absolutely in terms of traffic, because they have those resources. So content marketers can really rise to the top as publishers. So you also want to tie your SEO to specific keywords, and that was a matter of what we just discussed a slide or two back, taking a look at what keywords convert versus what keywords don't convert, what keywords are leading people to the specific areas of your site that really matter, and the keywords that people are using to find you, and making sure that you're incorporating those keywords into your copy and into your website or your Facebook page or your Twitter tweets, etc. And you have to set goals for all this. Is it awareness? Is it buzz? Is it brand? Is it traffic? Is it some or all of the above? You're not going to be able to measure everything, especially when you combine this visibility stuff with the conversion stuff, with the monetizing stuff. So it's very important, particularly when you're beginning, to decide what your KPIs are and to really stick to them. And for those of you who don't know, KPI is an acronym for Key Performance Indicator. And one of the key words in Key Performance Indicator is key, because there are lots and lots and lots of performance indicators, more than you can wrap your arms around, and more than you're going to really realistically need to measure. So stick with the ones that matter. And my final piece of advice is be patient. This is not advertising. This is not campaign-based. You're not usually measuring content unless you have something very episodic or very seasonal just during the duration of the Super Bowl or just for Halloween. When you're thinking like a publisher and acting like a publisher, you're slowly building up an audience over time. It's going to take you time to figure out what people want. They're going to tell you, you're going to work to serve it. It's really a give and take. It's more of a dialogue than it is broadcasting, and you're going to have to work on, this is slow and steady wins the race. It's not about that viral genie being released from the bottle and suddenly everything's rosy. And that's why I didn't de-emphasize those very soft metrics, such as likes and retweets. That's how you're going to tell a lot of what's working in the beginning before you drill down and work on those much more substantive, hard number, monetized metrics. Thank you very much for your attention. Anybody who's interested in getting in touch with me, my contact information is on this slide, and a little bit about my company, and I'm very happy to take any questions.